Welcome to hell. There is no escape. There is no escape. You are in my control now. Welcome to hell.
Welcome to hell, everybody. Welcome to Hell Team Doom. I am back for another episode of Let's Talk About Horror, the horror podcast where your nightmares and dreams collide. And I am your host, Walterdoom. And let's give a big shout out to Callie the Wolf for delivering us this fire-ass beat. Also, let's give a big shout out to Algorythm-C. Yeah, if you guys want to follow them, their information is in my bio, in the description. But anyway, how y'all doing? If y'all want to follow me, it's your boy Walterdoom. Walterdoom on Instagram, Walterdoom1 on Twitter, Walterdoom on everything else that involves streaming. And also, I would like to give a big shout out to you guys, the audience, for still rocking with me, still listening to me every single week just to hear my nonsense. My goodness, let's clap it up, you guys. Let's clap it up. So if you guys were listening to me last weekend, you know that it was the It episode with Megan's World. And I gotta say, if you guys have not listened to that episode yet, you should. Yeah, we went over the It series because recently we both watched the movies. We watched the old school movie, we watched the remakes. And I gotta say, we all feel some type of way about the remake. The remake is total trash. Like, it literally did things in a weird way compared to, like, the original It movie, if you ever seen it before. So, yeah, if you guys want to see what we say on that episode, definitely check it out. It's available everywhere that involves streaming. But right now, what are we getting into this week, you guys? Oh, I'm going to tell you what we're going to get into. So this week, we are going to get into Netflix's new movie, sci-fi movie, Awake. And, I thought it was more of a horror movie, but it is more of a sci-fi than a horror. In a way, you could kind of say it's like a sci-fi horror thriller-ish movie. But I'm going to talk about that today, you guys, in a new segment, but not really a new segment. Because literally it's just what I've been doing all the time. In this new segment, I'd like to call Thoughts of Doom. Let's hit the music.
Reality. Unseen by most. A place that is just as real, but not as brightly lit. A dark side.
So Netflix released this new film called Awake. This movie is starring Gina Rodriguez. She is the star of Jane the Virgin. For some of you that have watched that show before, one of my favorite shows, even though I watched one season of it. Maybe something I shouldn't be admitting as a straight man, but I do enjoy that show. But this movie is starring Gina Rodriguez in this film, where she plays this character named Jill. Jill is a rehabilitating drug dealer, drug addict. I don't know which one the film wants us to believe or know, because there are scenes where she is dealing drugs where we know that she's a drug dealer. And then there's a scene where she is talking to her kid's grandmother, and she's telling her, like, well, since you can't sleep, I guess you're not using anymore, which kind of gives a hint that she's a drug addict. But anyway, in this film, and she's also I guess, disarmed soldier in the reserve too. That does play a role in this film later on. But in this film, she has these kids, Matilda and Noah. Noah's the oldest child. He's played by Lucius Hoyos, and Matilda is played by Ariana Greenblatt. They end up in a car accident for whatever reason. I mean, everything starts off with the car accident, and then what ends up happening is that a lot of fuck shit happens. So power is no longer a factor. Power doesn't work anymore, and everybody in the world cannot sleep for whatever reason. What ends up happening in this film is that Jill, she starts trying to protect Matilda because Matilda is able to sleep for whatever reason that the film doesn't want to reveal, but is a big reveal in the end. And there is a spoiler by a way that I am going to mention. So she protects her daughter from everybody. So she's protecting her daughter from like all the crazy people that are sleep deprived, and she's protecting her daughter from Dr. Murphy, who did help Jill get this security job, even though she's still drug dealing, but get her this security job at this university where she is still in drugs and dealing it to like whoever wants to buy. But Jill's main focus is to protect her daughter and basically keep her from becoming Dr. Murphy's test subject. So what we find out at the end is pretty much like the only reason why Matilda was able to sleep is because during the car accident she drowned and more than likely died. And because the police resuscitated her with CPR, they restarted her heart and body to where like now she is able to sleep again. How did we get here? So the only reason why we got here and why is because I did want to watch a movie with Gina Rodriguez, even though on this channel Gigi Saul Guerrero is our goddess. All praises to her. No sim shit, by the way. But Gina Rodriguez, she's on that mid-tier level, of hotness, if that doesn't get me canceled in any type of way. But I just wanted to watch a Gina Rodriguez movie because she was in it. Was this film everything I wanted it to be? Not really. But we'll talk about the things that I do like about this film and things that I didn't like about this film. Now, one thing, let's get into like why I liked it first. Well, the things that I liked about it first. So I do like the fact that they do talk about sleep deprivation and the use of technology and what use it would have during an apocalypse. So I do like the concept of it being brought in this film. Were they a good mixture? That is debatable. I do like the fact that they talk about sleep deprivation. It's kind of reminiscent of Nightmare on Elm Street in a kind of way, because instead of dying in your sleep, you die when you're awake too long. So I do like that idea. And maybe that could have been like a cool little storyline that Nightmare on Elm Street could have explored a little bit if you stay awake too long. But I feel like they kind of did in a way, but it's just not as sophisticated as probably I wanted it to be. Yeah, I do like the fact that, the explanation goes like if a person is awake too long, and this is what they explain in the movie, and this is by one of the characters named Brian, who plays kind of like a little bit of a pivotal role in stuff that I hated about this movie. I know I'm kind of mentioning a lot about it, but when I get into like why I hate some of this stuff, it's gonna be some major fuck shit. But Yeah, he kind of explained that, when you're awake too long, your mind kind of goes into a bit of psychosis and what have you from being sleep deprived and not being able to sleep. And I do like the fact that at the point he says, like, yeah, well, eventually, like, your organs will fail, you'll go into paralysis, and then what happens after paralysis? I mean, you end up dying. um I do like the fact that they do give that knowledge to the audience that whatever is happening to them is happening at an accelerated rate. So basically, if your mind is kind of already like at a feeble state and not getting a bit of rest kind of makes you go crazy, yeah, it's going to be times 3, times 4, or what have you. So I do like the fact that they do play that as like a pivotal role in why everybody is kind of like losing their shit to put it plain and simple. Another thing that I do like about this movie is, like I mentioned before, is the technology aspects of it. So as you know, we're all kind of like attached to our electronic devices. I mean, hell, right now, me recording this podcast, I'm using like 3 electronic devices. If you ever look at my Instagram story, on Walterdoom, by the way, you'll see like a bit of sometimes when I set up and, see like some of the things I use when I'm recording. In this film, they hinder technology by a lot. Basically render it useless in a way, because anything with a computer chip in it is basically useless. Now, I do like the fact that with lights, they're no longer like a factor. Now you have to use candles like the old days, back days when it was before Thomas Edison and what have you. I do like the fact that in this movie, like, a lot of cars are just basically useless, because we all know right now cars are operating with a computer inside. For a lot of us, we know that our fuel injections in our cars are now electronic, which it wasn't even the case back then, before 1968, where like a lot of the cars, they ran under carburetors and mechanical fuel injection pumps. So cars like Dodge, or like the old Dodge or the old Camaros that you will see, they ran with like carburetors and mechanical fuel pumps. Well, mechanical fuel injections. So basically, cars like a Tesla will be totally useless. Saves energy, but totally useless, and I guess I feel like sometimes this is kind of like a movie that kind of makes a commentary about what will we do if technology just all of a sudden is no longer a factor for us. What are we going to do if technology fails and we have to rely on our own ingenuity and skills, And as you can see in the movie, like, they were reverting back to like old, ancient, or archaic techniques, I do like also some of the cinematography and the CGI. There's this one scene where Jill, Noah, and Brian, they're talking about how like everybody is eventually gonna snap. So Brian is kind of trying to explain to Noah how like the mind, when it doesn't get any sleep for like a few hours or a few days, you start losing your mind a bit and go into a bit of psychosis. So Gina Rodriguez delivers this very cringy line, and you get a lot of this in this film, by the way. So you get a lot of cringy dialogue. So she delivers this line where she says, "Your mind will bend till it breaks. You're just gonna snap." And then it transitions into the scene with this pastor who does a snap when he's explaining this story. I don't remember what the story was, but I thought it was like a cool little transition. And they do other transitions that's cool just like this. Um, so yeah, I really do like some of the cinematography that's done. I like some of the gore that's in this film, but I don't like the violence necessarily. And what I mean by I don't like the actions of the violence that's being taken onto said characters, but the way the character got killed, oh, that shit was fucking gruesome. By the way. So, in that same exact scene with Brian, he's at the church. He's telling everybody how, if they don't get Matilda to the hub and what have you, everybody is going to die. This is how special this little girl is. Eventually, this cop, which all cops are so fucking useless in films, which we all come to know, but this cop who is already kind of losing his shit, he gets the wise idea of killing Brian just right then and there, which is so random. It was so random to me. And I felt like Brian was one of those characters that could have played a major role in kind of creating that obstacle in the film if this movie knew what it wanted to do, kind of way. And if they had an absolute reason on why everybody was staying awake. But the cop kills Brian. Brian is dead. The way he shoots him is he shoots him from the back of his head. And you see Brian, he loses an eye, and it's really gruesome. I mean, y'all know me. I love my gory films. I love all those Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Saw, Hostel type films. But to see this scene, it was just it was mild. So if you're somebody that's oh my God, I don't want to see a bunch of gore, this movie is not gory at all. It does have a bunch of fuck shit violence, by the way. But beyond that, this is literally all the stuff that I like, because if I mention any more, it's going to get into the parts about things that I don't like. And we want to get into that right after this break. So, like you shouldn't say in a scary movie, I'll be right back. All right, we are back to talking about Awake for a bit and all the things that I now just don't absolutely like, but I absolutely loathe this film. And let's start off by talking about the sleep deprivation. Now, I know I mentioned that I like the concept, but that's the only thing that I do like. I do like the concept of it. Now, when you get into the meat and potatoes of everything, you kind of think can sleep deprivation really kill you? Well, yes and no. Now, I saw this report, well, this article, not report, but I saw this article a couple of days ago, and it dealt with this scientific experiment done in 1964. Basically, this report came out in 2019. They were talking about the effects of what sleep deprivation could do to you. So an experiment was done in 1964. It was a short-term experiment. It was done on this high school kid named Randy Gardner. So what happened to him is that he pretty much was awake for 11 days and 25 minutes straight. 11 days, that's a lot of days to be awake. So when he did finally go to sleep, he fell asleep for 14 hours and 40 minutes, and then he was awake for another 24 hours. In that experiment, they didn't really go into much of the effects on what happened to the kid, I believe. But what this article does talk about is what effects could happen to a person that is sleep deprived for so long. Now, in order for something like this to happen, it's usually just caused by insomnia. So it's usually a rare case of insomnia where people are up for a very long time. So in this same article, they talk about how like from like maybe like 6 to 30 months, it could have like the effect to where like, yeah, maybe organ failure will take place, which the movie does kind of go into, which I do like. The movie does relate real life science into this film, because let's face it, like a lot of movies kind of like Hollywood up some shit all the time, but they actually take like some real scientific evidence and actually applied it to the film. Now, the thing that it's also kind of like real life information, like I mentioned before, they said, well, the character Brian said, like, well, yes, paralysis would take place after organ failure, and who knows what happens next, It was like a hint. He didn't directly say, like, people are going to directly die from not sleeping. Based on the article that I saw, lack of sleep doesn't really kill a person per se. Maybe the actions is what causes the death to occur. So, in the same report, they took a statistics from the Sleep Health Foundation in Australia, and it was from like the years 2016 to 17, and it highlighted that 3,017 deaths happened due to lack of sleep, but it was like sleep related, lack of sleep, I should say, related incidents that led to death. So the number one in that report was like motor vehicle accidents, which to me is like a NODA factor. I mean, I remember times of being like really tired because I was in college, taking classes, working part-time, and living in California, like everything is just highways, So it's like driving to one destination to the other from a freeway, and it's just like sometimes there's like backed up traffic, and at a certain point you do get sleepy behind the wheel. Honestly, I've recalled numerous times about almost falling asleep behind the wheel and feeling like, yo, I could have crashed into this person just now, But that's one of the biggest contributors. Another one that was like very big and that had a high number was coronary artery disease that had 1323, strokes led with 958. Another one that was like kind of commonplace was workplace injuries that had 94, depression that had 215, type 2 diabetes that had 65, congestive heart failure was 61. So, and the way that they presented all of this was like, it's pretty much general information. It doesn't go into like people's family history or anything like that. But it all makes sense. And it kind of does make sense with some of these characters and how they die, and it's like they didn't necessarily say like, well, if you don't sleep, you'll die, or anything like that. No, it's literally, it's implied like, yo, with lack of sleep, we're going to go into like some form of psychosis and we're all going to die. Did they really kind of execute it properly? No, and that was my biggest problem, is that the execution, and there's a lot of dealing with execution for this movie for me. A lot of execution has not been really well thought out, It felt like they worked under a budget and they threw their budget on like certain things more and other things not so much. Like writing, for example, which we are going to get into right now, which is with them killing off potential storyline opponents that could have been key factors, honestly. So I'm talking about like in one scene, there were these prisoners that got out of jail. They were free and what have you. Jill, she has her son in the library with Matilda also. And Jill is trying to teach Matilda, like, hey, you got to learn how to defend yourself. You got to learn, like, how to fire a gun. You got to learn how to fire a rifle. You got to, like, now study the books in the library because this is what the new world is going to be. And by the way, can I just add, like, this fucking girl cried about everything in this film. It was so ridiculous. So she started crying about the guns and whatever, and talking about how she don't like guns. And it's just like, little girl, she's not telling you to like guns. She's telling you to how to, like, defend yourself. And I mean, I'm not a super gun activist. I'm not pro guns or anything, but I'm pro screenings, like, you know, gun, like, you could have your Second Amendment rights, but, like, that's fine. But let's start screening more and start limiting what type of guns we have. And I'm not trying to make this a political thing or anything, but that's just my thoughts. But later on in the scene, you see these prisoners. They're out, they're loose. You know, Matilda is pretty much in the car. Noah and Jill, they're pretty much like going at it with each other, you know, arguing and what have you. So the prisoners get loose. Matilda is being taken by a prisoner who takes the Dodge, and he's pretty much driving off with her. The prisoners, they find Jill, they see Noah. One of the prisoners I thought was like really hilarious, you know, like Jill, she fires off the gun to try and like scare the prisoners away, but ends up finding out there's no more bullets in the gun because, you know, guns don't have a finite amount of bullets. Well, guns do have a finite amount of bullets, but it doesn't have an infinite amount of bullets inside. You know, like in most movies, I swear, like, it feels like sometimes in like action films, not superheroes, but like the heroes in the movies, they have like infinite number of bullets in their like little gun that they have. It's so crazy, but yeah, in this film, they do play that as a role and a factor, which is good. You know, it's not like, oh, well, I got infinite rounds and what have you. But as she tells Noah, who is very hesitant, which you get a lot of that in this film. I don't know why these kids are so hesitant around danger. It's like, it's danger. Move. It's like almost like Friday the 13th, where like a lot of the characters, they run to the danger instead of running away from the danger. Hence why, like, I'm thinking like, even though they call this movie a sci-fi movie, it's literally like almost like a sci-fi horror in a way, you know, if you fix a few elements of it. But yeah, you have this one prisoner. As Noah's running away, you get this prisoner. He says the most hilarious line. He's like, "Yeah, Noah, run, you pretty little bitch." And it's like, this is like the most funniest thing in the whole film. Honestly, like, there is nothing else funny in this film except that prisoner. Why we didn't get more of that prisoner, I don't know. They could have brought him back. They could have kept him in there. He could have been a problem in some type of way. It kind of frustrated me a little bit that they didn't have him in the rest of the film. Like, he could have been at the hub trying to look for Noah, trying to chase him down and what have you. Another interesting characters that were kind of like, why did they get rid of them, was this Latino guy and this hillbilly guy who was working with this other guy who was taking drugs from Jill. They killed the guy that took drugs from Jill, but the hillbilly and the Latino guy who was working at like this little like mechanical shop, which is where like Jill pretty much got the Dodge from. And we'll get into the Dodge a little bit more because, oh my God, this is so terrible. But I feel like those characters, because of how like unhinged they were because of their sleep deprivation, especially the hillbilly guy, they could have been like another big obstacle, especially if they found out like the girl could sleep. They could have been more of an obstacle of Jill trying to protect her child. But for the simple fact, like, we had these guys for one moment just to show Jill taking the keys to like this Dodge, and they take a Camaro, and then later on we see them brutally murdered later on. So Jill takes home dude's gun. It just really like made me in a state of not flux, but more like in more of a state of perplex, because I was just like, those guys could have been useful in the movie because of just how unhinged their character arc was. You know, I felt like even with like the soldiers, even though they were going crazy, which I think like was a good idea that they did, but it just did not really give much, I guess, of a. I didn't really care for it, is what I should say. I didn't really care for it because literally at the end of it all, they ended up killing each other, which doesn't make sense because I felt like. But I mean, I guess it makes sense because they were kind of sleep deprived and they were having like these drugs that were supposed to keep them awake, but it did have some psychoactive effects. But it wasn't satisfying to see for me. It wasn't a satisfying thing at all. Another thing that they could have did, which I felt like because there was like some hallucinations in this movie, I felt like they could have made some of the hallucinations seem obvious that it's a hallucination so the audience knows like, oh, this is a hallucination. There's a scene in this movie, and I'm not too sure whether it's a hallucination or not, but in the middle of the movie, in that same scene, I should actually go back. In that same scene where Matilda is being taken off by a prisoner, he comes back just in time because movies have to movie, picks up Jill, picks up Noah, and now all four of them, they're driving off to the hub right now. So the prisoner, he goes by the name of the car that he stole, which is Dodge. Dodge, I honestly, for me, was like, he was so-so, honestly, for me. Like, the only characters I really thought were good were that prisoner that said, no, you pretty little bitch, come over here or run away, and Matilda. Honestly, for a little girl, that little girl could act, honestly. I mean, I have to give it up for Ariana Greenblatt, you know? I mean, she went to the school of Joey King, you know? That little girl is really showing some acting chops, and I hope they really put this girl in some more good movies. Yeah, like, those were the only two good characters, and I wish we could have explored a little bit more with the prisoner guy. You know, and although I am talking about how Matilda was crying a lot, you know, because she did a lot of fucking crying, which was so annoying to me, she was still a good character. Like, she played her role well, even though at a certain point there was a scene where, like, it should have been consistent because this girl is scared of everything. She was literally scared of everything that she saw. At one point, she sees, like, this female monkey whose brains is being, like, drained out because they're trying to figure out a cure for this whole sleep deprivation problem. She is unmoved and just by seeing the monkey laid out and its brains hanging out. And it's so weird to me because I'm like, you're crying about shooting a gun. You're crying about like a possible attack that was happening, which I'm about to get to in a minute. And just like everything that's happening in the movie. But at this moment, this is where you're not crying. Yeah, it lost me for a second. Hence why I said like consistency with this film was just really off. But going back right now to like this scene that I'm not sure whether it's a hallucination or not. But anyway, you see like this scene where Matilda, she's pretty much driving everyone. She's learning how to drive because Jill is teaching her how to drive. So she's driving down in this open road. All of a sudden they end up in this area where it's just a total, not really a dead end, but it's a trap. It looks like a trap. So you see like all these bodies hanging down. You see like these people creeping out of nowhere through the bushes. And what they end up doing is start attacking the car. Eventually our heroes, and I use that loosely, escape from the problem. And all of a sudden you just see an open road again. So to me, I'm thinking like they were literally hallucinating. And that's another problem that I had, but I'll get into that in a moment. But they all hallucinated the same thing at the same time. Okay, my question was, is that even possible? You know? So definitely, one was, can a hallucination happen while you're sleep deprived? Yes, it can. So I was reading this one article from Self. So it was about this girl who was very sleep deprived for a few weeks because she just got over a breakup. She went into a new one immediately, and she was very busy with school. So she only got like a couple of hours of sleep a night. So with her, it took like about a couple of weeks before she started hallucinating and seeing things in class. So what she ended up seeing in class was like this teacher that had like very short hair started growing out like right in front of her. And when she saw this, she was very amazed that it was happening. So she sat there and was like, well, why isn't anyone else moved by this? She blinked and saw that everything was normal. The teacher with the short hair was back again. After that happened, because she went outside to kind of like recoup herself and what have you, she went back into class. All of a sudden, this man enters and he comes in and starts stabbing the teacher. She's wondering, like, why isn't anyone else doing anything about it? So before she starts getting ready to run, she blinks and the man is gone. So she thought that she was literally going crazy. But what ended up happening is that she was really just hallucinating from being sleep deprived for so long. Now, in this movie, a lot of the characters, they're sleep deprived because everything's being accelerated also, and that's going to cause their hallucinations to act up a lot quicker. Normally, for any hallucination to happen, it takes like about a couple of weeks, you know? It's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do my thing. I've been up, slept like 2 hours, you know, team no sleep, but, you know, in like a few weeks, maybe like 3 weeks, I believe is what they said, like you'll end up sleep deprived and start hallucinating and seeing things because and it's not necessarily like a psychosis thing, but it's just something that just happens normally. It's like a little bit of psychosis, but not really. So that was one. Now, two was, can they really collectively see the same thing at the same time? Now, possibly they can, and that does take a bit of psychosis, and it's called Folie à Deux, which is also a Fall Out Boy title album. But beyond that, that is a way that everybody could collectively see the same thing at the same time. But the only way that could happen is if somebody is in a very mentally ill state or in a state of psychosis, sometimes schizophrenia, and if you are locked in with that person, like you're always with that person all the time, and you know, it's kind of like, I guess, people that are going crazy together. So you'll have this person who is called the inducer, will kind of induce like this whole mantra of like something is happening around them when really there's nothing. It's all just a hallucination. So I found it fascinating that this was something that actually happens because I never really heard of it before. So going back to the movie, I'm like, okay, there's no way that they all saw the same thing, because it was just like, okay, granted that there is somebody that probably is having like a bit of psychosis and they are kind of like together all the time, but there was nothing and nobody that actually suggested like, oh, watch out for this, watch out for that, you know. And the way the scene is actually presented, it makes it seem like everything is happening in front of them. But when like they get away from everything, you see like there's nothing behind them that they're leaving from, and no real damage to, well, I mean, there was damage to the car, but it's like maybe they're the ones that caused the damage because, you know, they're kind of losing their shit. So I thought that was like a very bad scene, and also it could have like presented a good scene if it was a hallucination, is if they kind of like made the hallucinations a little bit more of a horror-esque demon. You know, sometimes like even like something from like Conjuring, or just like, it doesn't even have to be Conjuring, but just like kind of deform the people in a way that it looks like, okay, they're not really there, you know? And I just felt like, because they didn't do that, I was in a state of confusion. Like, did this really happen? Did this not happen? Did they just lose their own shit? Like, what's going on, you know? So that was another thing that was bad. And I'm going to get to the last thing that was really bad. besides everything else that was really bad. But was definitely this story. And the most thing that's like really bad about this story is who the fuck is causing all of this? And this is one thing we never get a real answer about in this film is like, how does everything happen? Granted, like I could take the fact that they're going to say like aliens. I'll deal with that because it's a science fiction film. But they never really got to the bottom of like how everything happened. You know, it was just like one random day, Jill is driving her kids. All of a sudden, some light just flashes and what have you. Then everything goes haywire and then all hell breaks loose, you know? And it kind of reminds me of Bird Box in a way because even though Bird Box's chaos was a little bit more structure, I felt like this structure was just almost as bad, you know, like it, like not, if not worse. It was probably worse, actually. You know, it was like Bird Box's chaos was a little structured, but it was still bad because it still felt random. But with this film, it just felt like, okay, random shit is happening, and all of a sudden, all this shit goes down. And somehow, some way, these people that Jill used to work with have all this knowledge about what's going on in a matter of a couple of hours, which was another thing. How did Dr. Murphy and her crew have all this information about what was happening and why people were being sleep deprived, but they couldn't come up with a cure? You know, it's like they knew everything and they had all the answers in a matter of like a few hours. Mind you, like if you're watching this movie, you'll see that it was like only one day. Barely even one day, I should say. People are sleep deprived and already people are being jumped into a state of chaos. And I get like, yeah, it takes like maybe like a few days, and maybe because like Dr. Murphy is a sleep expert, she would know like, okay, we're moving like as if we've been sleep deprived for like a few days. But at the same time, who actually notices that in a matter of a few hours? It's mind-blowing to me that this film just didn't like take a few days, which they could have did. They could have took a few days where people was just like, okay, couldn't sleep for one night, okay, whatever. 2 nights happened, okay, didn't sleep again, okay, whatever. 5 nights happened, what the fuck is going on? Like, you know, and they start asking questions. Like, there's a process to all of this, you know, and I feel like this movie didn't take that moment to kind of like do that. It was just like, okay, this just happened. Now it's like, hey, everybody, let's start going into total chaos and what have you. And it's just like, how do we get to this sway? How? But this movie truly was a film of just total cringe, besides the acting, which was also not really that great because I felt like sometimes the actors didn't believe in their own characters. Dialogues that were just like questionable, or just like, why is this in the film? Or, you know, just things that we don't really care about. Like, here's an example. Matilda asks Noah about his girlfriend or his ex-girlfriend, and she actually asks him like, oh, did y'all ever do it? It's like, why do you care? Why movie are we making this little girl who is probably like 11 years old in this film, but not in real life, but in this film, asking her brother, her teenage brother, is he out there having sex? It's like, film, what? But again, movie have to movie. But my conclusion on all of this is, if you guys want to check this film out, that is completely on you. I did a poll on Instagram to see everyone that pretty much seen this film, to see whether or not they liked it. 100% just really hated this film. And I hated it too. But other than that, we're going to take another break, you guys. And when I come back, we are going to go into the outro.
Now get my way, bitch.
as you guys know, we got a Slasher Corner movie of the week every week, where I highlight a slasher movie that you guys should watch. I know I've been kind of lacking on that a little bit, but it's more of the lines of me not watching that many movies because I've just been hella busy. I mean, my schedule has been like hella busy, and we all have hella busy schedules, man, but it's not really an excuse. So I'm trying to like reformat the show a bit, just in case if like I don't have a slasher movie for you guys. You know, maybe I'll start recommending movies that are just not slashers and what have you, and just keep the Slasher Corner more of like just a recommendation type segment, you know, which could also pretty much work in a way, because technically it doesn't have to well, I mean, actually, yes it does. It have to be a slasher movie. What the fuck am I saying? What are you saying, Doom? But as producer Doom is like telling me like, yo, hurry up. So it is Juneteenth, you guys, at least for me. I mean, based on whenever you guys listen to this, we are in the week of Juneteenth. And as you guys probably know or probably don't know, this is the time where slaves actually got out of slavery in 1865 in Texas on this date, because Texas, of course, has to be the only state where they're still keeping slaves during that time. So yeah, so the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 63, but on this date of June 19th, they were pretty much like the last slaves to be free. So this is like a day that's finally being recognized in the United States, which is a good thing. But I do hear like this history is not being taught in schools in certain states right now, which is, I'm not surprised at all. But I want to suggest a movie that's kind of like relating to slavery, a horror movie. Maybe not the best one, but it is a movie that I do feel like had a lot of potential, and it could have been a lot better than what it really was, or how it ended, really, because it had a lot of good ideas. But did those ideas really manifest itself? Not as much. It was a little clunky, but they could have like, you know, made it a little bit interesting if they focus on one or two subjects. It's interesting because I had a conversation with Megan's World about this movie, and what she kind of told me that was very interesting is that what if they made this movie a 10-part series? Now, if you guys are wondering what movie I am suggesting you right now, it is Antebellum, if I'm not being too clear. It is definitely Antebellum, so definitely check that out for Juneteenth. But like I mentioned before, Megan had a very interesting conversation with me, and it was just like, yo, what if they made this film into like a 8 to 10 part episode show? I said that could actually fucking work. Honestly, I mean, I was reluctant at first because I was like, yo, I need a visual, because I'm a visual learner. For a lot of you guys that probably don't know, I'm a visual learner. I have to see stuff in front of me. I have to actually do the stuff in order to learn it. You know, reading sometimes help. You know, someone telling me kind of helps. But when it comes to like, if I'm actually doing it with my hands and actually like doing said activity or said thing to learn how to do it, that's how I learn better. I am definitely a visual learner. I know that much. I need it done right in front of me to where I could be like, oh, okay, now I get it. Because I'm that slow. But other than that, you guys, that's pretty much it for the show for today. Happy Juneteenth, by the way, whenever you guys are listening to this. Happy Father's Day also to all the dads out there. I mean, there's not enough of them out there in the world. I'm not one, so I'm gonna just be watching wrestling on that day. So anyway, but other than that, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for watching the YouTube page, which I was literally about to say at first. But if you guys want to follow me, it's Walterdoom on Instagram, Walterdoom1 on Twitter, Walterdoom on everything else that involves streaming. And this has been another episode of Let's Talk About Horror. This is America. Don't let them catch you slipping now. Heroes do eat pussy. Stay diabolical. Peace.